Hey guys, this is Illusion Podfic, and today we're going to be reading Undercover Mission by Amethyst Cookie Cry. The summary is, Dick and Wally go undercover to get information, but they get mistaken as a couple, and maybe even come out of it more than friends. Alright, without further ado, let's hop right in. Going undercover normally isn't too hard. They had a lot of practice, from their Titan days. Of course, they hadn't been Titans for a long time. Dick readjusted his beekeeper-like veil before looking to Wally to see if he was done getting ready. You remember my code name, right? Dick looked towards his best friend to get confirmation, only to start shaking his head to see that Wally was struggling to put his boots on. Yeah, it was Flame or something like that, right? Wally adjusted his boot straps to make sure they were secured for the mission before looking back towards his friend with a goofy smile, laughing slightly at his friend's facial hair, and saying, You know I'm just kidding, you're being too uptight about this. Rolling his eyes, he looked down at his outfit and couldn't help but feel like it didn't fit him. Do you think that they'll believe I just got back from jail, or will they figure me out as soon as they see me? Wally asked, not sure if he could fool anyone from the new rogues. Thankfully, it would be a smaller, lesser-known group, but that didn't ease his worries by much. Dick looked back to his friend and grabbed his shoulder before saying, It's Freddy Donardo or Burn. And you'll be fine. Don't stress too much. You've done this before. It's not like our first meeting. You've just been away for a while. He gave a smile before taking his hand away and adjusting his gloves. When they both finished getting ready, they made their way towards the rundown building. Opening the door, Dick was relieved that they were not the last ones there, although they weren't the first ones either. Looking towards a familiar black-haired figure, he nodded his head before moving out of the way for Wally to walk through the doorway so they could shut the door. Mirror Man. Mirror Man looked up and made a half-grunt of their names. Ermod, Burn, and gave a crooked smile before going back to cleaning his gadgets. Wally, or now known as Ermod, gave Mirror Man a short look before examining the building that they were in. It looked more like an abandoned factory that was repurposed into a makeshift hideout. The last building they were in was similar, but definitely different from this one. While Wally looked around, Dick made his way over to one of the corners and started going through one of the boxes in search of something. Making his way over to see what his friend was doing, he looked back towards Mirror Man, only to see him giving Wally a look, squinting at him. It made Wally nervous. Had he already figured him out? They've only met a few times, but still. Before he could worry about that anymore, Dick handed him a propane, taking hold of it with the half, not expecting to be handed the heavy object. Hey, what the... Wally exclaimed, before getting cut off by another tank being thrusted into his arms. Dick only looked back at him before reaching into the box one more time to pull out a flamethrower. Hooking it up to himself, Dick motioned to Wally to hand over one of the tanks, taking it from his hand and hooking it up to the weapon of choice. While hooking up his gear, the door opened once more to allow two new people to come into the building. Mirror Man looked up from his spot and greeted the new people. Mr. Magic, Weather Witch, you finally decided to show up, and here I was worried that I'd have to see those two keep on flirting in front of me with no escape. Wally looked up at the villains before looking back at his friend, looking back and forth for a second before pointing at himself. Are you talking about us? We haven't been flirting. We've only just got here. How could we have been flirting? Wally was very flustered by the comment, and he didn't understand why. I mean, they're best friends, yes, and sometimes these things can be misread as romantic relationships. But not this, not now, especially when the only interaction they've had is Dick handing him the tanks. Mr. Magic looked between them and let himself settle his gaze on what the speedster was holding for the moment, before looking back at Mirror Man and saying, The boss should be here soon. We will not worry about trivial things at this moment. Mr. Magic made his way to the back of the building, leaving Weather Witch at the front to close the door. You know, I did think this team was missing something, and I have been thinking something has been up for a while, Weather Witch said with a sly smile, shutting the door behind her, before walking over to Mirror Man, not without keeping her eyes on Wally like she was tracking prey. A loud noise made everyone look back at the door, seeing that it had been flung open. The penguin walked through the door, his cane tapping with every other step. He took a drag of his cigar before speaking. I've called you all here for an important reason. Not only do we have an important meeting with the old rogues, we also have to discuss plans for our next mission. The penguin stopped in the middle of the room in front of a table looking towards the team before tapping his cane on the table twice. The group made their way over while Wally followed, slightly hesitating if he should as well. Making sure to put the canister down first, Wally walked to the table and stood on the end next to Dick. The rogues all took a glance at them before getting back to talking about what they should be expecting. Dick noticed the way the old rogues would look towards Wally and him, and he couldn't quite understand why. Well, not before Harley Quinn decided to pipe up. "Oh, Byrne, I'm so glad your boyfriend is with you again. I know being apart can take so much out of you." Did they all think they were dating? But before he or Wally could say anything, the other rogues all nodded in agreement. "I was wondering when he was getting out. You seemed more down without him," Ivy said. Now he was really confused. Was he? Did he seem more down? He was definitely overthinking this, especially when Harley skipped her way over and shoved Wally's face closer to Dick's. If not for the veil, they probably would have kissed. Blushing, Wally pulled away, trying to get out of her grasp. The other rogues all laughed for a bit before getting back to talking and planning their next moves. Wally felt more comfortable the more they talked. It helped him get his mind off what had just happened. It also didn't help that it always took him a second before getting used to undercover missions. But he did enjoy them, especially with his friend. But before he could think about it any longer, the lights went out. Only being able to go off of the light from Dick's suit, he tried looking around before spotting a bat-like figure. The color draining from his face, he scrambled to get back while the others started to yell, "It's the bat, quick!" One yelled. All he could hear was the sound of yelling and the rogues going down or escaping. Wally grabbed Dick, sweeping him up bridal style before rushing out, battering swishing behind him like it was aimed for his head. Wally didn't stop running until Dick grabbed his arm. Slowing down, he breathed heavily, not because he was out of breath, but because if there was anything that really scared him, it was the bat. Dick pulled off his veil before wheezing out a, "You didn't have to run like that." Dick had his hands on his knees. Wally patted him on the back with a slight worried look on his face, but there was a hint of amusement. "Well, looks like Byrne and Armand are now dating. We didn't even know it." Wally laughed to himself with a slightly wispy look on his face. Dick looked up from his crouched position and decided that his internal struggle was not warranted anymore. He branded himself and stood back up and said, "Well, who's to say we're not dating now?" Wiggling his eyebrows, Wally looked back down before laughing loudly. "I think it's time for you to go home, lover boy." "A kiss for the road?" Dick made kissing noises, exaggerating his lips and cupping his hand by his shoulder. Wally, taking him up on the offer, gave him a peck before backing up. "Hey, don't tell Batman. I'm not ready to die just yet." Dick laughed even harder than before, grabbing his face and kissing him properly this time. They parted, and before they could talk anymore, a battering came flying at them. "B, come on, we're having a moment!" The dark figure stayed up on the roof, but let out a grunt and reached for another. Wally took the sign and sped off, but not before telling Dick that he'd call him soon. Dick waved back to him and then glared up at his father. "We are so talking about this when we get back, you hear?" Alright guys, and that's the end of Undercover Mission by Amethyst Cookie Cry. Hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you next video.